When it comes down to comparing some things, sometimes we like to make loaded statements. We compare things that probably aren't comparable, like a super modified Supra against a brand new Mark V Supra. Like, they just don't compare, but we make the argument anyway, well, cause it's fun. And I'm Alex at.fi on Instagram, and today, on today's episode of Opposite Lanes, we are going to be comparing something, well, pretty much almost identical. We're gonna be comparing a Shelby GT350 to a Camaro ZL1. Let's go. All right. So first up, we have Kirk's Shelby GT350. Now, before we even get into this conversation between the two cars, let me be clear. I already know that this is 120 horsepower down on the ZL1. I also know that this probably would be more compared to a 1LE, something like that. Not necessarily the straight up the ZL1. You'd want to compare the GT500 for all intensive purposes. However, we don't have that car. And in all honesty, I really enjoy the GT350, and I think that there are a couple things that you can compare the two against that may bring the underdog up toe-to-toe with the ZL1. Plus, that one was crashed. So really, I mean, in terms of value, they're pretty much almost the same thing. So when we start talking about Kirk's car, let's get the first thing out of the way. We already talked about the fact that it's not strictly apples to apples with the two cars, but that really doesn't matter. And if anybody knows about GT350s, is that it's a flat plane crank. Now, a lot of people sometimes get confused as to what that actually means. So I'm gonna try and break it down using some like 10-second science. Where are you going, Mazda? Where are you going, friend? Oh, a lot of traffic on this road. You have to remember, flat plane cranks pretty much fire every 90 degrees. Faster, more rotation or less rotational mass means it's a faster to rev. It means a lot of the power sits on the top end of the motor. That is why GT350s have an 8,300 RPM rev limiter. One of the biggest pros to that is you get a very interesting, distinctive sound that you wouldn't really get out of any other car out there. Now, people do ask, you know, what's the daily drivability of these cars? And I have driven both. I personally really enjoy the GT350. In my eyes, it is a car that you can take anywhere. I think it looks a little bit sleeker than the ZL1. I think the ZL1 looks very brash. They made it as aggressive as possible because they had to, because they were trying to jet out as much as they could on the highest option trim of the Camaro. Whereas I think the Mustang just kind of does everything, I almost want to say nicer. So let's get it up to rev so you can kind of hear where she's coming from. So you can hear it's just a much different noise than usual. It almost sounds like a European domestic. It's this odd combination because of the way that the actual motor is assembled. And when you're looking at your traditional crankshaft, or if you're looking at your traditional V8 or your traditional V10 or whatever it is that you're looking at, if you're not looking at flat plane, there's more rotational mass. It fires back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that rotational mass, the reason that a lot of times those muscle cars have a lower RPM range and have, it almost feels like a sluggish ramp up is because of the counterweights that are put in place to prevent damage to the motor from that rotational mass. With a flat plane, you don't have that. One of the negatives of having a GT350 or driving a GT350 is that, first off, when you're comparing it to the ZL1, it does have less horsepower. The second, probably the bigger thing though, is that since it's naturally aspirated and since it is a flat plane, a lot of that power or a lot of the emotion in the car sits all the way at the top. So if you are wanting to drive this to get the experience, you really do have to drive it. Like, you have to drive it. Like, not just kind of drive it, not like free to play drive it, like you have to drive it. And if you look at the tires on this bad boy, which by the way are sitting on some RSR forged wheels, one-piece forged from RSR, which is super nice, you'll see that they're pretty well burned through. That's not because Kirk doesn't care. It's because you have to drive it like this if you want to have fun in a GT350. You just have to. Now, these cars also have a bunch of tech in them too. It's got heated seats, it's got cooled seats, it's got all of that. And when you're looking at daily driving a car like this, because, you know, we could talk about the racetrack and all that sort of stuff, but we're not on the racetrack. I'm on a backcountry road because 99% of the time we're driving on backcountry roads. We're in Wisconsin, very little to do here besides that. There's a drag strip and that's about it. When it comes down to that, the GT350 does it all really nicely. I mean, even the back seats have a good chunk of space. Not for people. You'd have to take off your legs. But good enough space to where you could actually put some stuff in it. The trunk is nice. The dash is nice. The sound system's fantastic. Everything about the car is really well defined. And when you're comparing the two, this is a car that you could daily drive. Some of the cons about a GT350, first and foremost, it's a GT350. Compared to the ZL1, which uses a lot of cross-functional components from other vehicles, like the motor, the Z06, you are going to pay more when things do inevitably break. It's just how it works. On top of that, a lot of the fun sits at the top of the RPM range, which means you kind of have to drive like a jack wagon to have fun. I mean, that's just how it is. And thirdly, I think one of the toughest things to pick up one of these cars is right now is because it's the price point, the used price point on this car is really close to a ZL1. You can get a ZL1 right around the same year for, at least up here, like $3,000–$4,000 more. So for $3,000–$4,000 more, you can get 120 horsepower more out of a car, and it's supercharged, which means you get the power at the low end and the middle. What one would you pick? But I will say there's nothing more exciting than driving a muscle car that has an 8,300 RPM rev range that feels, you see that, Max? What do you feel? How's it going?
Pretty good.
Does it feel good? Does it feel good?
No.
How do the seats feel?
Great.
How would you rate the seats?
10.
10?
100%.
Max rates the car. What would you rate the whole car, Max?
I love the car.
You love this car?
I love this car.
Do you love this car more than the ZL1?
I've never ridden in a ZL1.
Oh boy. A lot of times when people do ask themselves, you know, what is it about a GT350? Why would you buy a GT350? They are bred more for the track. They have always been. These sort of cars are really meant to be going around tracks. They're meant to be going around corners fast. They're meant to be sitting at the high RPM range, which doesn't make them the most fantastic daily driver unless you're comfortable with them sounding fast but not actually going very fast. And that's one of the biggest gripes people have with the GT350 in terms on if you're daily driving the car. The ZL1, on the other hand, not so much. And that's why a lot of people will say that they prefer the ZL1 over a GT350. Now, if you compare it to a GT500, that's a whole different class. Again, if you have a GT500 and you'd like us to review it in an episode of Opposite Lanes, you should just come up here because I would happily review that. All right, let's get going on the old ZL1 here. with the 4G LTE Wi-Fi built into the car. It's like a freaking Starbucks coffee shop in here with all the technology, you know what I'm saying? Oh, God. Oh. I don't know who was sitting in this previously, but they must have been like 7'10". Smells kind of funky in here, doesn't it? All right, so this is the Branded Title Co. ZL1, and if you guys haven't followed along, oh, that's no good. That may prevent us from filming this segment. Well, let's try one more time. Maybe it's just a fluke. Well, Max, we're not filming this segment. Alrighty. I'm so excited to jump into this Apple CarPlay 5G Wi-Fi car. All right, so this is Branded Title's 2018 ZL1, and in case you're wondering, these are red racing seat belts, right? 650 horsepower, 120 more than the GT350. This met a cliff, pretty sure, and they just recently finished building it. This thing's a monster, in all definitions of the term. Let's go give her a test drive. Now, the one thing to remember with the ZL1 is that it is the Z06 power plant, which is probably one of the biggest perks to having one of these. If you really look at it, having something that goes across different platforms, keeps costs down, it keeps parts easy to find, all that sort of good stuff. Now, I'm not an overtly huge fan of the way the ZL1 looks in comparison to the GT350. Not to say I don't like it, it's just different, and it's just a little bit more brutish. It's more in your face. The front grille looks like lasagna slices. We're definitely slipping as we're just climbing around in gear. And you can hear that supercharger whine. Definitely feels way more up. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's how it feels. It feels more like it's up in the air compared to the GT350. A little bit loftier, and definitely has way more power at the low end, which is all obvious, but you don't really realize it until you're driving it. I love the tone of this car. Wow, active rev match on. We are scooting, Max. I love the power plants that Chevy has. They are by far some of my favorite. Even though it's not a flat plane, even though it's got more rotational mass, and even though it tops out at 6,500 RPM, having low end supercharged power is just a blast. And although you can't see it, every single time we do that, the back end just gives her a little jingle jangle, the traction control turns on, and you feel like you're just controlling it, but really the car is the only thing keeping you at bay. One of the things I love on top of just the engine is just the fact the tone is so good. Now, Kirk had an older exhaust on his GT350, which I think ended up actually having like a crack or a hole in it, and which is why it sounded so good in my eyes. And now the tone, I think, kind of gets deafened into just a typical muscle car noise, whereas this has a very distinctive noise. Max can't keep his headphones on. I will say though, the flat bottom steering wheel, all of it, super nice. It's a big car. One of the biggest cons, you can't see a damn thing out of this car. I don't know how many times Camaro has to make this generation to still have difficulty with blind spots. I cannot see if there was a car behind me at all in the other lane because those pillars are just so darn big. And I will say that I almost still enjoy the GT350 interior more than the ZL1. The rev matching obviously takes the cake. I love that. The M2s have it now. It makes you feel like you're a race car driver even though you're not. I love all of that. And the flat bottom's nice, but the rest of it isn't really anything to scream home about. It's very plasticky. It still has this weird infotainment that I know is gonna date extremely hard in like 3-4 years. The buttons feel too big and too soft, too trailblazer, I feel like would be the answer. It just feels too trailblazery. I feel like you'd see these in an SUV. And when you're paying top dollar for a ZL1, I kind of like having buttons that, I don't know, don't look like mashed potatoes. Daily drivability, honestly, I don't see any difference in daily drivability. I would say the most difficult part is this is still 650 horsepower. So the odds of you driving this in the wintertime, that's a cop, smile and wave. Things are getting sweaty. I will say though that you probably could not drive this as much as you could the GT350 because of the amount of horsepower and low end torque and all that sort of stuff. It's got good amount of space, which is fantastic. It's got a great tone. Reliability standard we kind of already talked about. I think the ZL1 still just sometimes feels, I don't know, like when I'm driving the GT350, it all feels like it's one thing. It feels like it's one car, one mood, one tone, one style. And that's what makes it such a unique car that I enjoy driving. When you compare it to the ZL1 kind of still has stuff from all over. The buttons don't feel like they belong in this car. The engine and transmission definitely do. But then you're kind of paired with this mismatched feeling of you're not really entirely sure if, well, you're not really just entirely sure if the part of the car that you're looking at is supposed to be in a ZL1 or if it was supposed to come from a different car. Or maybe the branded title boys just decided to put in a different center console because the one that they did have blew up. We never really know. The technology in here is fantastic, but you're not really paying for the technology. You're paying for the horsepower, the transmission, and the power plant. And that's something that you also have to remember is the GT350, I think, has a little bit better of how they tied it all together compared to the ZL1, even when you look at the difference in horsepower. Now, my favorite thing about this car that the GT350 does not have, besides the power, that hood will always be one of my favorite hoods to ever come out of Chevy. The exposed carbon fiber center cutout, to me, is my favorite thing in the world and is only topped by when they had the clear cut top on the Corvettes to show you the supercharger. That was my favorite thing in the world. The rev matching is also just bang on. I don't want to drift around this corner. I don't want to drift around this corner. I don't want to drift around this corner. I'm going to just scoot around this corner. This thing just makes you want to drive so fast and do silly things that you know you shouldn't, because then when you do this, you're like, well, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you, you know? This car is so much fun. And I know that it's put so many people on their ass. Reliability takes the cake here. Pure power takes the cake. But combining the function and form as a daily driving vehicle, because that's what we're looking at, not just racetrack performance, even though this does beat it around the track. I don't know. Can I just have both? Both of these cars are absolutely nuts. The GT350 is like a refined, well-oiled, sleek machine. It's like going to a nice 5-star restaurant and having the waiter talk to you in a lot of words that you have no idea what they mean. The ZL1, on the other hand, is kind of like just going to your favorite burger joint and just getting slapped in the face with a big old beer as you go get drunk and you have yourself a great Friday night. Both have their pros and cons, and both are a little bit different in their own way. I think if you're looking for something a little bit nimble, maybe not so much in your face, maybe something that's a little bit more controllable, the GT350 takes the cake. If you want something that's fun, ludicrous, you can continue to modify and get in your 900 horsepower with like a cam and intake and a few other bits and pieces, the ZL1's probably the one to take. At the end of the day though, when we did get both of these cars, one of them came relatively clean, And we had 2 of those that were completely totaled. So that should kind of explain to you the difference in the driving experience on what we've seen out there in the world. But if you want to let us know on what you'd like to see us cover next in the next episode of Opposite Lanes, you can do so by dropping a comment below. And of course, if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. Really, both of them are fantastic. A little bit more expensive on the reliability, a little bit cheaper on the reliability. A little bit more expensive on the life insurance, a little bit cheaper on the life insurance.